The film opened with a boy named John, who grew up in a home filled with violence. His father was a violent man who often beat his mother, and sometimes him too. Every night, John lived in fear. He often listened to the sounds of shouting, breaking dishes, and his mother's weeping. Because he was raised in such a toxic family environment, this negatively influenced his social life. He and his sibling, Rory, often gathered with a group of troubled children. John often caused trouble and was forced to steal. The group had a base camp in a warehouse, and as a symbol of the group, each member had a tattoo behind their ear. One night, John's father came home heavily drunk. An argument erupted, and this time, it was more violent than usual. Unable to watch his mother continue to be abused, John impulsively grabbed a kitchen knife and stabbed his own father.
Rory!
His action was driven not by hatred, but by a desperate need to protect his mother. Though his father only sustained a stab wound, this act forced John to be dealt with by the authorities. He was not defended by his mother or even Rory. Instead, he was labeled a danger to the family and was sent to a juvenile detention facility, a rehabilitation home for troubled teenagers. There, he grew into a stubborn, angry individual who struggled to trust anyone. Day by day, his new surroundings only pushed John deeper into trouble. Inside the facility, conflicts frequently erupted between the white and black youths. John began associating with a group of white supremacist teenagers, where violence became the sole means of survival. It was there that John began to have a deep hatred for others, for the world, and even for himself. While being locked up, John received devastating news that his mother had died from a drug overdose. Because of this, he was now completely alone and would live at the rehabilitation center permanently unless someone adopted him. Time passed and John grew into a cold and harsh teenager. The racial conflicts between black and white youths continued to happen there. Then one day, the facility staff delivered surprising news. There was a married couple who wanted to adopt John. John flat out refused, but he was forced to accept the offer, especially since there was still a one-year foster period before the adoption would be finalized. John was then left waiting in a room. It was revealed that the couple who wanted to adopt him were an interracial couple named Eldridge and Mariana. What truly stunned John was that Eldridge was a black man. For John, who had been raised in an environment of white supremacy, this was the hardest thing to accept. He felt the system was betraying him. John focused his attention entirely on Eldridge and bombarded him with questions. Mariana quickly realized that John was likely a racist child. Eldridge, on the other hand, was a well-educated man with a master's degree and a good job. During the meeting, John was holding a drawing he had made. Mariana initially assumed it was a depiction of violence, but Eldridge recognized that it referenced a specific book, indicating that John was actually an intelligent boy. He could interpret the meaning behind the picture, and that truly amazed John, although he didn't show it. John finally went home with Mariana and Eldridge, starting a new chapter in his life after years without parents and siblings. Upon arriving at the house, he continued to question Eldridge. He was still unable to believe how a black person could have such a comfortable life. As he entered the house, John felt deeply that this was not his home and that this couple was not his family, especially Eldridge. Although Eldridge tried to be welcoming and patient, every word was met with a cold reply from John. To John, the color of Eldridge's skin was an impenetrable wall he could not accept. At the dinner table, Eldridge mentioned that John could start high school right away since the new academic year had begun. So the next morning, Mariana and Eldridge drove John to school, but John decided to get out of the car before they even reached the entrance. At school, John noticed that the students were heavily into BMX bikes. Then he was immediately bullied by a student named Justin over the clothes he was wearing. Thankfully, a fight was averted when the teacher arrived. There, John also met a girl named Sherry who showed concern for John. Shortly after, class almost started, but before that, John excused himself to go to the restroom. When school ended, there was a commotion because Justin's and his friends' bikes had all been stripped of their tires, and they immediately suspected John. Because of that, the police soon came to Eldridge's house. Fortunately, the police had no evidence aside from suspicion, so they eventually left. However, Eldridge went into John's room and reprimanded him, saying John should not be so childish when dealing with conflicts with his friends. Eldridge warned him that if the police ever came back to the house, John would be sent back to the rehabilitation center. The next day, when being driven to school, John showed embarrassment for having a black adoptive father. Of course, Mariana immediately scolded him for his attitude. Fortunately, Eldridge, with his sense of humor, was able to lighten the mood. At school, John's relationship with Sherry grew closer. Sherry turned out to be a skater girl who loved skateboarding, which helped her blend in with the other students. Because of her influence, John eventually began looking into BMX. He stole a magazine from another student and even went to the local skate park. Back at home, John tried to find money anywhere he could. In his search, he went into Eldridge's study. He noticed that Eldridge was a successful former wrestling athlete, proven by the numerous trophies displayed there. Inside a desk drawer, John found a box containing article clippings about Eldridge failing to make it to the Olympics due to accusations of violence. However, before John could finish reading, Mariana caught him. She ordered John to leave before Eldridge returned home. That night, Eldridge entered John's room because it was past 10 o'clock and time for him to sleep. But John refused to listen, which annoyed Eldridge. After seeing the scandal involving Eldridge, John was now slightly afraid of his own adoptive father. But at that moment, Eldridge took the opportunity to share his story, explaining that when he first came from the countryside, he had to work 3 jobs just to be able to attend school, which was how he eventually met Mariana. John then asked why he, specifically, was chosen for adoption. Eldridge simply replied that everyone deserves a second chance. Eldridge then left John's room. Upon exiting, Eldridge noticed what John had been reading. So the very next day, he went to a BMX shop to buy a bike specifically for John. After that, he surprised John with the gift. John was secretly thrilled to receive the BMX bike, but his pride got the better of him, and he accused Eldridge of trying to bribe him just so he could feel like he had a son. Upon hearing that, Eldridge was understandably tired of John's childish attitude. He said he could physically wear John out right then and there, but realized it would be pointless, so he just left John alone. That night, while working in his study, Eldridge heard noises from outside. It turned out that John did not actually know how to ride a bike and was out in the darkness, trying to teach himself. Upon knowing that, on Sunday, he took John out to teach him how to ride. As expected, John was too proud to be taught by a black man, but Eldridge told him to drop his ego and pointed out that an adult like him would learn to ride much faster than a kid. Then Eldridge patiently taught John using his own method, and sure enough, it was easy for John to learn, and he was able to ride the bike that very day. It was at this moment that he showed a genuine smile. That slight change of attitude was also shown at home when he began helping Mariana prepare dinner. The next morning, John no longer needed a ride to school, as he went on his own with his new BMX. Besides riding to school, he started learning BMX tricks from the internet. Slowly, day by day, he not only became skillful at cycling, but also managed to pull off a few tricks. Sherry then started inviting John to hang out at the skate park so he could learn by watching other riders.
Another morning, same old town. The pavement cracks, but I'm still around. My shoes are torn, my chain's a mess, but I feel alive when the world's a test. Mom's old words still in my head. Don't look back, that's what she said. The streets don't care, but they let me breathe. Every bruise I wear feels like belief.
On the other hand, John's relationship with his foster parents was growing closer and warmer too. 3 months later, John asked Eldridge to come watch him ride at the skate park, and Eldridge agreed to go. On the promised day, they rode their bikes to the skate park together. Once there, John ran into Roy and his old gang. Seeing his sibling, Roy tried to convince John to rejoin them, to go back to being a petty criminal and causing chaos, but Eldridge intervened. Initially, Rory had told his friends to leave John alone to live his new life. However, one of them, Jack, refused to let John go and insulted Eldridge with a racial slur. Eldridge was then ganged up on. While Eldridge was a wrestler and capable of fighting, he was struck from behind, straight on the head, and was injured, making him incapable of fighting back. Rory and his friends then fled the scene, taking John's bike with them. And because of the assault, Eldridge had to be hospitalized. Back at home, John apologized to Mariana. He insisted that he had urged Eldridge to leave the skate park before the fight broke out. The incident, however, stirred up memories that Mariana had tried to forget. She then opened a drawer and pulled out the old article clippings. She revealed that Eldridge had once been falsely accused of assaulting a white woman. Because of that accusation, he was kicked off the college wrestling team, failed to qualify for the Olympics, had his scholarship revoked, and was sent to prison. While locked up, he was severely beaten by other inmates, all because he was a black man accused of violence against a white woman. Due to the physical violence he suffered in prison, he sustained injuries that made him unable to have children. Hearing that painful story, John became completely empathetic. His feelings deepened when Mariana told him that out of hundreds of potential foster children's files, Eldridge chose John because he understood the reasons why John acted against his own father. For Eldridge's sake, John decided to take action. He went to Jack's warehouse, knowing where Jack would store his bike. As Jack was indoctrinating his friends with white supremacist ideology, John retrieved his bike. He was spotted and barely avoided being caught. A chase ensued, and even though Jack and his friends were driving a car, it was easy for John to escape them on his bike. Another day at school, John overheard Justin challenging his friend to perform a trick off a staircase, but the friend was too scared. John then offered to raise the stakes and bet a larger amount of money that he could successfully perform a 360-degree spin trick. Because the trick was so dangerous, they agreed, mostly hoping to watch John fall from the top of the stairs. In reality, John had never done the trick before. He had only watched it on the internet, but he confidently pedaled his bike toward the stairs, and, to everyone's surprise, he managed to land the trick perfectly and won the bet. One day, Eldridge finally returned home from the hospital. He was extremely proud that John had managed to steal back the bike he had given him. Later, at the kitchen table, John presented Eldridge with a welcome home gift. It was a simple gift, but held enormous significance. It was a small plate showing black and white birds united. Eldridge later went to John's room. He told John to stand up, then embraced him warmly. At that moment, John cried, as it was likely the first time he had ever been hugged by a father. Another day at school, Sherry showed John that his trick video from the previous day had gone viral on social media. Not only that, but she had also sent the video link to Scott Carroll, an MVP in the world of BMX. Because of this, Scott eventually contacted Sherry to arrange an introduction to John. Justin, who was on Scott's team, was initially unhappy that John was being noticed based on only one trick. Because of that, John proved himself by showing off several other tricks he knew.
Pretty good, kid. Yeah, you got some talent.
Scott finally admitted that John was talented and invited him to join their practice sessions. John now had a new activity. He attended practice every day, quickly improving his riding skills to be above average. What John did not realize was that Rory occasionally came to watch his progress from a distance. One day when Eldridge was dropping John off for practice, he saw Rory heading toward the skate park. He then stopped the car and caught Rory there. It was then that Eldridge learned that Rory was not just a common thug, but John's sibling. On one occasion, Scott announced that he would select 5 candidates to enter a championship and wanted to hold a qualification immediately. At that moment, John suddenly recalled the memories of his childhood trauma. All his life, he had always messed things up. Now he was being asked not to ruin the chance he had been given. The enormous pressure on his shoulders caused him to fall while attempting a trick in the air, resulting in him losing the opportunity to qualify. Back at home, John was furious with himself. He felt he was destined to be a failure, just like his biological father. Eldridge understood exactly how John was feeling, so he encouraged John to come with him. John initially thought Eldridge was going to give him another life lesson, but he was mistaken. Eldridge had actually invited Rory to come to the house. John was, of course, shocked to see his sibling there. It turned out Rory had not come to lure John into trouble again. Instead, he wanted to offer his support. He also took the opportunity to apologize and explain that he and their mother had deliberately stated that John was a danger to their family. He revealed that this was all done at their mother's wish to ensure John would be kept away from their abusive father. Rory said he never expected John to suffer so much while in the facility. He also shared that their father was currently in prison and chose not to leave. Upon hearing this, John finally understood. Rory asked John to accept him back as his brother and wanted to support him in the world of BMX. However, John felt everything was pointless since he had already failed his qualification. Rory then reminded him that when they were children, they never understood the word failure. Now that they were adults, nothing should stand in their way. Finally, thanks to Rory, John found his motivation back. They rode their bikes together, and Rory taught John a new trick to impress Scott. Armed with this new confidence, John returned to the training arena. Without any further ado, he showed Scott his improved skills, and this time, he successfully completed his tricks without falling, which was very impressive. However, Scott had already chosen 5 people for his team. John then negotiated, insisting that Scott knew his ability and what he could do, and that if Scott did not pick him, he would still compete by finding another team. Upon hearing this bold declaration, Scott finally agreed to put John on the team. Later that night elsewhere, Jack was looking for Rory, who hadn't returned for a while, despite a plan they were about to do. News soon reached him that Rory was with John and Eldridge. Meanwhile, at home, John, Eldridge, and Rory were preparing John's bike before he took it to the training facility. After they were finished, Rory said goodbye and left. But as he walked down the street, he saw Jack's car drive past, heading toward Eldridge's house. Sure enough, Jack and his gang were planning something bad. They got out of the car, and just as they lit a Molotov cocktail, Rory arrived just in time to stop them. Eldridge saw what was happening and told Mariana to call 911, while he and John rushed outside to help Rory, who was being severely beaten. Due to his severe injuries, Rory had to be hospitalized. At that moment, John thanked Rory, saying that without his help fending off Jack and his gang, their house might have been burned down. Rory used the moment to apologize again, saying he should have been the one sent to the rehabilitation center instead of John. He asked John to still go to the tournament and make both of their families proud. He also promised to tell the police everything, ensuring John would no longer have to worry about Jack. One day before the tournament, Eldridge drove John to the venue. There, they met with their main sponsor. After comparing their team's practice with the rival teams, the sponsor pushed Scott to have his team perform at the same high level. So Scott advised his team members to level up their tricks and be braver about taking risks. During a break in the practice, Eldridge took John to a restaurant. To John's surprise, Mariana, a social worker from the adoption agency, and Sherry were already waiting there. It was revealed that starting that day, John was officially adopted by Eldridge and Mariana. Although the trial period of 1 year was not yet complete, Eldridge decided he was ready to legalize John's adoption immediately. From that moment forward, John had Eldridge and Mariana as his official parents. They celebrated the occasion by having dinner together. The next day the tournament began. John was set to compete against professional athletes, including the reigning champion from the previous year. Larry, one of the participants, as well as the reigning champion, was the favorite to win. When he performed his tricks at the skate park, he scored 90 points from the judges. Shortly after, it was John's turn. He tried his best to compete, and his performance earned him an impressive 89 points. This was an outstanding score for a newcomer. Rory, who was watching from the hospital, was awestruck by his brother, as were Eldridge, Mariana, and Sherry. The second round then immediately began, and Larry debuted a brand new trick that earned him 94 points from the judges. When it was John's turn, he refused to give up yet. He pedaled his bike and showed his tricks, successfully dazzling the judges. However, on his final trick, his bike slipped from his hands and John fell, injuring his shoulder. Fortunately, Larry and John ended up with a tied score, but if John could not proceed to the third round, Larry would automatically be the winner. Scott was ready to concede, but Eldridge was determined to fight on. He explained that he had wrestled for 15 years and only needed 5 minutes to fix John's shoulder. He was deeply impressed by John's fighting spirit, and he didn't want John to give up right in front of the victory. Thankfully, he managed to successfully relocate John's shoulder. The deciding round required Larry and John to perform a trick on the large ramp. Larry successfully landed a backflip and stuck the landing cleanly. When it was John's turn, he was focused on making both Eldridge and his brother Rory proud. In a daring move, he successfully performed a combo backflip and won the tournament. Some days later, John went to visit his mother's grave and gave her flowers. After his debut on the competition, John went on to compete in BMX championships all over the world and became an active speaker for adoption and foster parents. His life was changed by the commitment and sincere love of his parents, Eldridge and Mariana, who were always by his side.